Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Elephant Den. Today we're going to be talking about a film that came out in 1939. It is considered the most watched film of all time, and it includes characters like the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion.
The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz. And it's interesting because it wasn't widely known until 1959, I believe, when they first aired it on television. And then that's when it reached millions of people.
Right. We have to remember that this was coming out just before the same year as the Second World War started.
Yeah.
At the end of the Great Depression.
I think it was literally a week before the war started.
Yeah. And I think that's also what adds to its magicalness is how it came out at such a dark time, and you have this whimsical experience following this little girl and her dog leaving Kansas.
Because this is a film that's been watched by so many, it's been talked about, I'm sure there's millions of movie reviews out there. We're going to try to do something a little different. We want to talk about returning to the Land of Oz. Because we watched it when we were kids, and now it's a different perspective. We're watching it as adults.
Oh, but still Wizard of Oz, because there's a sequel, I think, called Returning to Oz.
Okay.
I think what Ashley's trying to say, this is a film which everyone knows, and the troubled production. There's a lot of urban myths and legends surrounding the making of this film. Yeah, so I think it's just a fun way to kind of commemorate the old.
There was a lot of things that we learned about the process of making The Wizard of Oz, some not so great things and some wonderful stories. So we're just going to be kind of talking about that and then sprinkling in some true and false questions for Alex to answer. You guys are always welcome to answer if you'd like and join in on the true and false questions. It'll be fun. First question for you.
Okay. It's a true and false?
No.
Oh.
Returning to Oz as an adult, we've grown up, we have a different perspective on life. So obviously watching this film, it's going to be a different perspective for us. Mm-hmm. What was your initial experience?
The things which I remember and held on to from my childhood experience watching it stayed. The creepiness. Mm-hmm. Now with our experience and knowledge and what it takes to make a movie, and of course you hear stories throughout your life about this particular film and its production, you do notice those elements of the film. And because this was a time where studios had no limit to what they could do to make a movie, I think those things are what make it so unique to its time and just special.
Yeah, because for me it was more so like even the story. As a kid, I always believed that Dorothy's visit to the Land of Oz was real. I remember even asking my dad, being like, oh, so did she go? And my dad's like, well...
You know, that's just like your opinion, man.
It's like when I asked my parents about Santa Claus, they're like, what do you think? I'm like, yeah. They're like, okay, then you still believe it for another year.
Yeah. And then watching it again, you really pick up on those subtle things that you probably missed as a kid. Like, I didn't know the three men that she was with at the barn were the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion. It's interesting because as a kid, yeah, that world was real to me, and then as an adult, it's kind of sad because it's like, oh, that was just a dream. Even her response in the end, and Aunt Em being like, oh, you were just dreaming. It's like you really see it as an adult perspective.
That's very true. Like, I don't think I'd remember her waking up from the dream part of it, you know? It was just...
You really believed that world to be real.
Yeah, you remember Oz.
Yeah.
And they were deliberate in not spending too much time in Kansas. They weren't even going to film the song. They were going to cut out Over the Rainbow, the most, arguably, most famous point in Judy Garland's career, obviously the film, but then that particular moment where she sings that song.
True or false?
Okay.
The Wizard of Oz was the first Technicolor film.
Well, I looked up on this myself. I know it's false, but I grew up thinking it was true, and I think it is the most famous first Technicolor film. And for those who don't know what Technicolor was, it was a technology used up until the 50s, cameras that were able to record red, green, and blue light in front of the subject onto 3 separate strips of film. Before Wizard of Oz and Becky Sharp, in the earlier 30s, Disney used Technicolor for their animation, the Silly Symphonies, the Flowers and Trees. That's where they added the blue strip, and before it was just red and green.
That's part of what makes the Wizard of Oz so cozy, though. It's the colors, right, that they have in the film, that make it feel so nostalgic and warm. And
the matte paintings in the background of you, and you have the yellow brick road going and growing off in the distance.
yeah.
But it does really feel like an endless stage play, you know? Generations now that don't grow up with that as much, I wonder how it stands out to them and if it's off-putting.
Yeah.
Because I love some of those matte paintings are so beautiful.
Speaking of color, did you know the scene where Dorothy walks out of her house?
The first shot
time
of
she
color.
enters
Yeah.
Oz. In that scene, Dorothy has a stunt double wearing her dress, but in all sepia brown. And the door and the house is actually painted all brown so that they can get the colors in that shot. Isn't that interesting? I didn't know that. But they had it painted out just for that one. It's only like literally a few seconds,
Yeah.
and they had to paint everything brown.
Yeah.
I'll show the clip right now.
You will. Oh, yeah.
True or false? Throughout the making of this film, they went through multiple directors before finalizing with Victor Fleming.
I'll say true.
You'll say true?
Yeah.
Spot on. Overall, The Wizard of Oz had 4 different directors.
Wow. And was that while filming?
Yep. They had Richard Thorpe. He was fired after 2 weeks. Even he's like, I don't even know why I was hired for that. George Cukor filled in for 3 days. And then Victor Fleming directed it for 4 months. So a majority of it was Victor Fleming, and I think that's why his name was on there.
And he didn't even finish it?
No.
Wow.
He was summoned to replace George Cukor on Gone with the Wind. And then who finished it was King Vidor, who completed it the final 10 days.
The king.
Isn't that crazy?
That's not usually a good sign.
No, right? So that leads to my next question, which is, with the chaos behind the creation of The Wizard of Oz, you've heard stories, we've learned some stories about it with, like actors being hospitalized, supposed abuse, and also the inequality, learning about the pay rate was different for all the actors on the set, including the dog Toto. With all this chaos, how was it possible that The Wizard of Oz became the most known, timeless, and beloved film that it is today? Too many cooks in the kitchen doesn't usually create the best
Good soup.
meal.
Yeah. No, and it's very interesting how even your earlier point of it getting more recognition a few decades later, but I think it has to do with just the state of the world at that time coming out of the Great Depression.
I do believe that part of it was the fact that it was a passion project for a majority of people. I would say more so like
That's right.
the actors.
Right, because the subject matter, the source material, was very beloved.
The Scarecrow.
Yeah.
People say that he even was preparing his whole life to play this role. The way his performance was prior to the Scarecrow, he had no limbs, the way he performed and danced. And so that's why he was it was his dream to play the Scarecrow. He argued because he was originally casted for the Tin Man. Buddy Epson, who was originally casted for the Scarecrow, they switched him to play the Tin Man.
So Buddy Epson was meant to play the Tin Man, but then he got poisoned from the aluminum.
Yeah.
And he was hospitalized and for weeks. And
Because apparently the aluminum dust that they used on him coated his lungs.
The scene where they go through the poppy fields and it starts snowing, that was asbestos, which is a fibrous material they used pre-90s, I think. It was used to insulate and fireproof housing and buildings. And they found out it's very carcinogenic. And they were just sprinkling this all over the actors at the time.
Apparently they were selling it as fake snow, and they used it on set a lot back then. So speaking of passion, also the Wicked Witch of the West, Margaret
Hamilton,
that's her name. For her, playing the witch was very important. Like, she was very passionate about this role as well.
Yeah, who else would she play, honestly, in that movie?
She was actually hospitalized as well for burns because...
The trapdoor thing? Yeah, the trapdoor didn't work, so the fireball effect.
Yeah, it burned her hat and her hand.
She was off for a few weeks.
Part of it is also the reason why it's a success is because they had no limitations.
No limitations.
They could do whatever they want.
The sets were filled with lighting, and it was cooking. And along with these costumes, there's legend that the Cowardly Lion's outfit costume was made with some or all real lion hide. I don't know if that's real, but either way, it must have been a very heavy and hot suit.
Oh, yeah.
Along with the lighting that it took to light up the stage because they needed it that well lit up for Technicolor.
Apparently they were using like all the lights in the studios that they could find for this production. It would cause outages nearby.
Wow. Did you want to talk about some of the pays?
In the song If I Only Had a Heart, the girl who says, "Wherefore art thou Romeo," is Adriana Casalotti, the voice of Snow White and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Snow White, well.
She was paid $1,000 for her only line in the film. I believe Toto was paid $125 per day or something like that, whereas the Munchkins were paid only $50 per day. Toto is the dog in the film. Speaking of Snow White, this leads to my next true and false question.
Okay.
The Wizard of Oz was inspired by Disney's Snow White.
I've never heard of that. Some things would make sense. You have the creepy forest, like I mentioned, the Wicked Witch. You have little people. I'll say true.
That is indeed true. So actually, because Snow White was a financial and artistic hit, MGM was encouraged to produce The Wizard of Oz and gear it towards children because they noticed how much of a hit and success it was. They were like, we're going to start with The Wizard of Oz. We're going to produce this. So Walt Disney, he was awarded at the Academy Awards with an Oscar statue for Snow White.
Okay.
And they even made him 7 little Oscar statues to represent the 7 dwarfs.
Of course.
And Shirley Temple presented him with the award. Apparently she was the first one they thought of to play Dorothy.
Judy Garland's great, but it really, what stood out to me this time watching it was those 3 characters, her, accomplices for the journey. You have the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and the Scarecrow. They're such good performers. They
talked about how the performances back then were, when they would sing a musical, when they would sing a song, it would mostly be presented on a stage or as a performance on TV. So this was the first, one of the first few films that came out at the time that they just sang, just doing everyday things. Yes. And that was odd.
Right, and it's quite frequent in the film, right? It's not just a few times.
It's like, it's the script, right? It carries the story forward. All right, so that's everything I have for you today.
That was
Thank
fun.
you,
Thank
Alex,
you.
for answering. We hope you learned something from this video. I know that there's so many Wizard of Oz videos out there, but this is something we wanted to talk about because we both love it so much. Learning about everything that went down in production and the history behind it, it really made us appreciate the film so much more. Even though we already loved it and appreciate it, it's just hearing all the hard work that went into it and the fact that people risk their lives.
It's a kind of production which is not possible anymore.
So if you haven't watched this film in a while, we recommend going and revisiting it and watching it as an adult, you know, a different perspective. It's always so great to notice new things, you know, and there's so much you can notice in this film. Before you go, we just wanted to mention that Alex and I have come out with a new concept for our channel called Movie Mood Mentions. What is Movie Mood Mentions, Alex?
Movie Mood Mentions is our new concept for short videos. Ashley and I are going to be putting together trailers for films that we love. And the purpose is to showcase the particular moods we felt while watching these films. What kind of inspired us as well was from a young age, I remember watching movie trailers, and sometimes the trailers were better and more exciting than the film itself ended up being. And that's the purpose of a trailer, is in a short time to really grab your attention and make you remember, ooh, this is something I want to watch in the future.
Thank you so much for watching our video. As always, if you enjoy this, please give us a thumbs up, comment on the video, talk about us, share this, you know, do your thing. If you like what you see, we also have other platforms that you could follow us on Instagram at Ashley and Alex, on Letterboxd at Ashley and Alex, and we also now have TikTok for our shorts called at Ashley and Alex. So go check us out on there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You're awesome.